$95 billion. That is the amount of money that our glorious Congress, our representatives in Washington, have allocated to spend on supporting Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, reinforcing their borders, protecting their citizens, paying their civil servants, feeding their homeless, arming their militaries. Meanwhile, the rest of us can all go to hell. And this was so important to the U.S. Congress that these incredibly lazy, decadent, and not even self-righteous, it's so far beyond self-righteous, entitled people who never work weekends, who take like the entire month of August off, just 'cause they decided to come into work on a Saturday to get this done. That's how important this was to them. And this was bipartisan. There were only like 94 people in all of the House out of like 435 members. There were like 95 people who said, you know what, I'm not going to vote for this. The rest cheered, they clapped, they hugged, they waved their Ukrainian flags all over the floor of what is supposedly the United States Congress, representatives of Americans, and yet they were waving their Ukrainian flags. Imagine that. You know, I'm so tired of talking about this. I almost didn't mention it, but it's like this has to be mentioned because people aren't paying attention to this. They don't know what's going on. Because it doesn't really help the press to dwindle on these topics because it's so unpopular. There are no Americans outside of the professional class in the major cities who support this. No one cares about Ukraine or Taiwan, and frankly, a lot less people care about Israel than they used to. Going back into the mists of history, in really any country, it's always been popular to put the concerns of your own citizens first. And in fact, if I may be so radical in asserting that there's a strong contingent of people in the world of any nationality who believe that their government should only be acting in their interests and helping their people. Most people on this planet are sane and don't think that their government should be propping up all sorts of various regimes across the planet. Yet that is the country that we live in. Our country has engaged in this business of picking and choosing the leaders of various foreign countries for much longer than any of us have been alive. They've been doing it for longer than our grandparents have been alive. And yet, all the while, what's the one consistent thing across all these different countries that we've meddled in, all these different governments that we've propped up with our tax dollars? What's been consistent? The average American's opposition to these programs. People have always opposed it, going back to the Founding Fathers. And yet slowly, this is what our government started doing over the course of our multi-century history. And so this country can scarcely be called a democracy. You know, the term democracy has been so beclowned over the past couple decades. And we all know, you know, what democracy means today. But, you know, I think a lot of people have forgotten what democracy actually used to mean. Democracy used to mean that you had, you know, popular majority rule. And there's a lot of great arguments against majority rule. But the fact of the matter is, if we had majority rule in this country, things would be a lot better. That's how bad our current system of government is. It's so bad that it makes democracy look good, while at the same time masquerading as a democracy and calling all of its critics anti-democratic. It's a true testament to just how disengaged the American public is, that we still have free speech in this country. Because with everything that is known and obvious with respect to our government, the level of treachery against the public, the corruption that is rampant and inherent in our system, the outright oligarchic nature of the regime, all of this should be information that would be mortally toxic to the regime's credibility amongst the public, and they should have to severely crack down on free speech, more so than they are now, much more so than they are now, in order to counteract it and to try and hang on to power. But, it's almost like in this country that the fact that we do have, the freest speech in the world, it's almost like it's desensitized people. Because the corruption is so out in the open and so known, and the fact that people my age and older grew up our entire lives knowing that our regime is a joke, that Congress has always had like a 13% approval rating or less. No matter who you vote for, the same things end up happening. You can't change anything through voting, particularly when you're talking about Congress. There's a little bit more of a chance with the presidency, but even still, things keep trucking along. If you have a president who strays too far from the norm, they end up getting trumped by the administrative state, which is exactly what happened to Donald Trump. He was overruled by his true superiors. That's why we didn't even get out of Syria. It was a pretty basic campaign pledge. Trump promised to get out of Syria. Trump ordered the military, get out of Syria. The military told Trump, yes, sir, Mr. President, right away. And then they proceeded to never do it. And then they told him, oh, yeah, we did it. Don't worry. We're out of there. They never left. They don't listen. There was a mutiny. It's straight up treason. They don't care. There are no consequences for these people. Go ahead. Vote for Trump again. Is anything going to change? No, they'll just have a stronger reaction against him. I mean, it'll be interesting, but it won't. It's not like we're going to fix the regime. If somehow magically Trump gets put back into office. But the way things are going, they're trying to head him off at the pass and make sure that doesn't happen. But even if you were to make it into office, it's not going to go well. And I'm not saying don't try. I think it's a good thing that people try, because the more people try and fail, the more black-pilled the rest of the population will become on the current regime. And the sooner they will realize that regime change, not abroad, but rather at home, is our only option. A guy self-immolated this week, which is always rough to watch. I don't laugh at these people. I don't encourage them either. I don't want to praise them necessarily as martyrs. I think that people, once they get to that place, it just shows the darkness that exists in our society. And I do think they're highlighting it by doing that, but it's not to say that you should do that. That's not going to, your life will never have more meaning, as a piece of charcoal than it does, just living a full, normal life. If you are healthy and able enough to pour gasoline all over yourself and light a match, then you're healthy enough to do some real good in this world. And so I don't encourage that. But just as in South Vietnam, when you get to the point when people are willing to do this for political purposes, and they're not just like one-off crazies. I mean, yeah, they might have you have a certain screw loose if you do this to yourself, but I think in both cases with the recent self-immolations, these have been mostly functioning adults. And I'm getting way off topic here on on self-immolation. I didn't mean to do this, but all I mean to say is that they are. Yes, it's not two is not data, but these are to me are just yet another indicator of the darkness that exists, in the minds of the American people with regards to politics in the present day. It's not something who happy citizens of a country do to themselves, in order to make a political point. You didn't see anyone in Back to the Future self-immolating, while holding a sign saying "Re-elect Mayor Goldie Wilson." But anyway, I wanted to address the content of the man's protest, which consisted of a sign that he was holding, which said, Biden is in league with Trump and they're about to fascist coup us. He was using fascist coup as a verb. Now, I hate to break it to this guy, Max, but the fascist coup happened a long, long time ago. At least since the end of the Second World War. Our country has been occupied, not governed. The permanent bureaucracy have had the final say at every stage ever since. To the extent that your vote mattered, it was only insofar as as your vote went to elect a president who stayed inside the lines. To the extent that anyone you voted for who won wanted to stray outside those lines, your vote was meaningless. It doesn't matter that you voted for them to do that. They got vetoed. So anyway, with that said, I think that about sums things up. Our democracy has been dead much longer than any of us have been alive. The regime hates us. Your so-called representatives in Congress, unless they're one of, the 95 or whatever, clearly have nothing but contempt for you, your family, everything you believe, everything you care about. They'd all be much better off if the rest of us just laid down and died. So with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.